Hi guys, my name is Stephanie Testa and I will be presenting my final paper for our human trafficking class. It is called Human Trafficking Awareness and Education in Pueblo, Colorado. Human trafficking essentially is persuading a person into commercial acts of sex, labor, or other services against his or her will through the use of force, fraud, or coercion. Force can be in the form of physical abuse, fraud, lies, or false promises. Essentially, they are tricking their victims. And coercion is persuasion using force or threats of force or violence. Often, the traffickers will threaten the victims' families, making their threats a little bit more effective in keeping victims compliant. If victims are under the age of 18, force, fraud, and coercion are not necessary to qualify it as a human trafficking case because the victims are underage. Sexual exploitation is when a person is drawn into sexual servitude through force, fraud, or coercion. This happens mainly to women, but men can be victims too, contrary to popular belief. Sexual exploitation can occur through prostitution, escort services, massage parlors, pornography, etc. Labor trafficking is a person is forced or coerced to work for little or no money by making false promises of riches and opportunity, also known as bondage or forced labor. Peonage is when the victim agrees to pay off a debt or obligation. This debt is often heavily inflated and almost impossible to pay off. Some victims' debts actually get passed on to younger family members once they're no longer able to work or if they pass away. Labor trafficking can occur in almost any industry imaginable. This can include personal domestic work, restaurant crews, hotel workers, healthcare employees, carnies from carnivals, cleaning landscaping crews. Anywhere there's labor to be done or work to be done, there's a possibility for trafficking. Many victims of human trafficking are hidden in plain sight in industries we interact with daily and locally. Human trafficking in Colorado. In 2015, Colorado had one of the highest rates of human trafficking in the United States. It was said that this is partly due to busy, crowded airports and a convergence of several major interstate highways. That can be evidenced by this little picture here. It says that I-70 and I-25 are easy access points used by traffickers to cross state lines. And Denver's busy international airport also makes Colorado a destination point for traffickers. In 2015, there were 93 cases of human trafficking reported in Colorado. One case I found was specifically mentioned, it was in Pueblo. And this is just a little graphic showing some statistics on the Colorado hotline. This is 2018. So in 2018, there were 342 victims identified and 111 traffickers identified. 48 businesses were involved in these cases. Lack of education and awareness. Colorado State Police Department Lieutenant John Koch of the Metro Vice Narcotics Unit said, "Is there awareness? Yeah. Is the right awareness for people looking at it for what it is? I don't think so." In other words, a lot of people are aware of trafficking. They know that it exists, but for the most part, they don't understand the scope of it, and they're not really looking at it for what it is. A majority of Colorado residents assume that child trafficking is more common locally. According to Koch, human trafficking in Colorado typically involves high-risk juveniles and adults. in contrast to young children. So while a lot of people are more worried about children in Colorado, they tend to see trafficking occur more in young adults and juveniles. Um, why is there a lack of proper awareness? There was a lack of proper education in our schools and a lack of publicity on the issue locally. Here's the beginning of my survey. I conducted a survey from October 30th to November 11th on 22 participants who live in Pueblo. I asked 11 questions regarding awareness on human trafficking, and all 22 participants actually attended public school. That was not intentional, but it worked out that way. As you can see by my demographics displayed, my range of participants is pretty well rounded. I've got people from all different levels of education, all different ages, all different numbers of years in Pueblo. So I tried to get a broad range of people, and I think I was pretty successful at that. Here is an actual picture of the survey that I gave out. It was 3 pages, 11 questions. Unfortunately, when I put the pictures in here, it renumbered each page starting with 1, but realistically it goes 1 through 11 on all 3 pages. So here are some results. 82% of participants were aware of the human rights issue of human trafficking. Only 1 of the 22 participants didn't know what it was. Based on the comments of all of those who said they were aware of the issue, the level of knowledge varied greatly. Some people demonstrated a good rounded knowledge on what it was and what it consisted of. Some were only fluent on one form of human trafficking, so some would assume that it was just sex trafficking, or some would assume that it was just children that we were worried about instead of the whole scope of the problem. A lot of people did not mention labor trafficking in their thoughts. 68% of participants, so 14 of them, knew the difference between sex and labor trafficking. 23% could kind of knew what the difference was, or they could deduct or assume the difference just based on the keywords sex and labor. 2 participants did not know the difference. All right, let's move me over a little bit. So, 77% of participants, or 17 of them, know it's an international issue that occurs in all 50 states. As you can see, here are my graphs. You can see we have there's a pretty good level of awareness here. This is another question. I said if you knew what human trafficking was, where did you hear or learn about human trafficking? And if you look at the total, I have to mention this. It's 26 because a few of the participants actually chose more than one answer. So we got a little larger range of answers for this question. Most people heard about it on the news, as you can see. We've got 9 that heard about it on the news. Our second highest response was social media, and then online. Notice only 1 person said grade school, 2 people said college, 1 person didn't remember. This is very eye-opening. Here is my questions about human trafficking locally. If you look at, are you aware of human trafficking locally in Pueblo? 14 participants said maybe. Specifically, the answer on the survey said maybe. I'm aware that there could be trafficking in Pueblo, but I don't know about it. So a lot of people believe that it's a possibility, but they haven't heard about any cases, so they don't know. A few people, 7 people, said that they did know that it was most likely occurring in Pueblo, and One person said no. Um, do you find yourself cautious of the risk of human trafficking affecting you personally? 15 of my participants said yes, and I was actually extremely interested in the fact that a majority of those that said yes put in the comments that they were more worried about their children than themselves. I found that very interesting. Um, do you find yourself? Oh, these are the same questions as above. Unfortunately, I kind of did it at a zigzag or at a cross diagonal from each other, but this is the pie charts that correspond with these graphs. These will show the percentages. So for example, this maybe, 14 people said maybe, that's 64%. Public attention and policy lawmakers. So 59% of participants, or 13 of them, said no, human trafficking does not receive a lot of public attention. Only one participant said yes. 68%, or 15 of them, said no, policy lawmakers don't do everything in their power to stop human trafficking. A common theme I saw in the comments were that lawmakers are more concerned with money and power and only use resources where it benefits them personally. I noticed this was a very large consensus among a lot of the participants. I found through that there is an overall distrust for law and policymakers and a lack of confidence that the powers are doing what they can to stop human trafficking in Pueblo, Colorado. Human trafficking in school. So 59% of participants, or 13, said that human trafficking was not mentioned at all in grade school. 32%, or 7 of them, said it was mentioned briefly. 3 of those 7 participants cited the Stranger Danger program, which if you're closer to my age, you would remember the Stranger Danger program. It was more focused on telling kids don't talk to strangers, don't take candy from strangers, don't it was telling us all these things not to do with strangers, but it never really got into why. And of course, human trafficking was never mentioned in the Stranger Danger program. 2 participants did not remember if they heard about it in school, and I'd like to note that not a single participant out of all 22 of them answered yes, they learned about it in school. And here are my graphs. The conclusion to my survey is people in Pueblo are aware of human trafficking, but not educated on the topic. Participants have overwhelmingly little faith in policy and lawmakers. Participants believe there needs to be more publicity and awareness locally. There is a definite need for public awareness, resources, and further education in Pueblo on human trafficking overall. I noticed that more people learn about trafficking from news, TV, movies, social media, and online research than they do actually being educated on the different types of human trafficking and how to take the steps to identifying victims and be involved. It would be beneficial to develop a grade school educational program to teach about the risks and forms of human trafficking. And I'll get into this a little bit more later. This program should raise awareness about how to reduce one's own vulnerability and the signs to be aware of to look for potential human trafficking in everyday life. The program should provide students with the national and Colorado hotline for reporting suspicious activity, as well as a list of resources for local human trafficking organizations. And I like to cite, much like the list of resources that we made for an assignment in this class, that would be perfect to give with the programs. Recommendations and strategy. So my paper is focused on the need for training and awareness, a program that needs to be implemented at the grade school level. During my research, I found a study conducted in Nebraska, where they surveyed a bunch of school personnel about how they believe we could best implement human trafficking education in grade schools. I found this study especially eye-opening and helpful because what better way to develop an educational program or think about one than having recommendations from the people who are going to be teaching it? Um, According to the study, some of the recommended recommendations found were that schools need to approach the issue holistically, involving all segments of society. So it shouldn't just be schools tackling this, it should be schools with partnerships with other segments of society. Um, School personnel and support staff should be trained, and these trainings should be incorporated into the standard training procedures, and staff should be required to attend them regularly. Much like a lot of safety trainings that we receive at work, school personnel gets them too. It would be beneficial if we could incorporate a curriculum, um, a regularly occurring curriculum that could educate them on human trafficking. Trainings should be in person with supplemental online information and further trainings available online. Trainings should educate staff on types of human trafficking and indicators to look for in victims. And trainings should be thorough, resourceful, and provide survivor testimony. Survivor testimony is the most powerful teaching tool, especially when it comes to human trafficking. I believe this wholeheartedly. A human trafficking curriculum should be developed for teachers to teach in their classes, and this should be implemented at different levels of sensitivity and age appropriateness in all grades, K through 12. For example, for kindergartners, for young elementary school even, they haven't learned about the birds and the bees yet, so it would be better to be a little bit more vague about the topic of sex trafficking. Um, but so just little things like that, we can adjust the curriculum to be more appropriate for all kids to learn, and this curriculum should be presented every year in school, drill it into their heads. Um, Human trafficking awareness should be incorporated into school activities like clubs and organizations, and posters should be posted around the school building, briefly outlining prevention and reporting strategies, as well as the national hotline number and the local schools protocols for response. And that leads into this next one. Schools should implement an anonymous and easy-to-use system for students to report possible human trafficking situations to trusted staff. The reason why this is important is because it can help avoid the confusion and apprehension of expecting a child to call the national hotline. While a lot of us can look at a poster and think, oh, I think something's not right. I need to report this. Pick up the phone and call it. But with young children, it might be better to develop a system where they have somebody they can go to report this stuff, and then we can take the necessary actions afterwards. All right, let's move me again. All right, so further recommendations and strategies, and this is outside of the study that I read. There should be a list of compiled local resources, again, like the one we created in this class. This list should be readily available to all students, staff, parents, and community members. Try to get it out there. It should contain all local organizations and groups for human trafficking info and volunteer work. For funding, I believe a government grant, like the grant approved in 2017 for anti-trafficking efforts and victim assistance in Colorado for groups in various counties. Um, for example, the Alliance to Combat Human Trafficking of Pueblo, Colorado. So there was a grant given a few years ago even for anti-trafficking efforts, and I believe with a grant, this recommended program can be implemented. Um, with a grant, the curriculum can be developed and introduced into the main grade school system. Eventually, it would be great if we could integrate the curriculum into all Pueblo schools. With collaboration from local agencies, further victims and survivors support can be achieved through more places like Sarah's Home. Now, Sarah's Home is a faith-based residential home for rescued sex trafficking victims and victims of abuse. And this home is specifically for girls aged 12 to 18, so underage victims. The program consists of counseling, therapy, life skills training, medical care, job skills training, spiritual guidance, relationship training, mentoring, and education. With a grant, more homes can be established, and these homes can reach all kinds of victims, not just children, but adults, men and women. Further victim advocacy and support can be achieved. A collaboration of professionals to assist victims with emotional support, therapy, housing assistance, and to guide victims through the process of becoming a survivor. The Alliance to Combat Human Trafficking in Pueblo would be a likely source for collaboration and manpower locally to help develop and implement the plans and curriculum. And here I emphasize group effort and partnership. This is a great opportunity for us to start working on strong partnerships in the community. Here on the left, I've got some pictures. Let's see. So this little piece up here is actually just a little snippet that I took out of my list that I submitted for my assignment this semester. And it just has a few of the Pueblo Central places, National Outline, Colorado Outline, etc. Methodology of success failure, or evaluating our progress. The best way we can do this is to use quantitative data in the form of a quiz or test given to students and teachers at the end of the curriculum and given to school staff following training. It should measure the main points of the section covered and test the newfound knowledge of the students. A good way to maintain this is to make sure that students and staff score an 80% or above on the quiz or test. If they're lagging in understanding, the curriculum should be examined for potential improvements. Qualitative data can also be taken in the form of performance surveys on the curriculum. These can also be given to students and staff after their trainings. These surveys should measure whether the students and staff found the material interesting, fun, and engaging. It should ask students and staff if they are confused about any part of the lessons and offer a section for recommendations to make the material more interesting. Surveys should be examined for trends or common answers among students and staff. These concerns should be addressed, and the curriculum should always be examined for potential improvement. Discussion and conclusion. All in all, Pueblo, Colorado needs to act fast in spreading more awareness and education about the issue of human trafficking in our community. The grade school system is the most beneficial place to start because vulnerability begins in childhood. Whether or not a child is aware and knows about human trafficking can be the difference between being vulnerable to abduction or not. The more a child knows about the issue, the more they can prepare themselves for the warning signs and red flags of a situation that seems too good to be true. Students, staff, parents, and some community members will be more fluent on the warning signs to look for possible incidents taking place within Pueblo. With this growing awareness, human traffickers will be less motivated to run their establishments locally, and the ones that are brave enough to try it run the risk of being identified by a community member. If we establish a strong educational strategy for our school education system, awareness and publicity for the whole community can then be more easily achieved. And I like to just mention that my recommendations, this is just the first step. Once we get education out there, we can further work on extending those trainings to law enforcement, health personnel, expanding awareness into the community, um, and just so much more. And I also wanted to mention this little picture I put in here. Next month is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. Um, so I just wanted to mention that. And thank you for watching my video. Here are my references, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you so much.